Hello and welcome back. Big Red Huddle. This is our second episode. We kicked off last week with episode 1. Really want to take a moment and just say thank you, all the listeners that took time to listen to the podcast, provide feedback. Some exciting news. We're now on Apple iTunes. We're on Spotify and YouTube. You can find us at Big Red Huddle on X and bigredhuddle.com. Again, won't have a lot of content on the website, as we're really focused on more of the digital and the podcast realm versus the written. But please look us up, interact with us on X, Twitter, iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. So let's get started. Let's huddle up and we're going to go off base here a little bit. We're going to start with Nebraska basketball. I am not going to sit here and claim to be a basketball expert. It's not really my swim lane, but man, do I enjoy it when Nebraska basketball is rolling. And Tuesday night in the Vault, Pinnacle Bank Arena, team came out and just dominated the number one team in the country, Purdue Boilermakers. Final 88-72, 16-point victory. Got close on a few different occasions. At each point, Nebraska had an answered and really pushed that lead out. And so as I approached this team coming out of the holidays and looking at the schedule, I was really focused on that 4-game stretch. Indiana at home, at Wisconsin, Purdue at home, and at Iowa. Really felt if we could come out of that with a 2-2 record, we really set ourselves up on the go forward. The schedule really starts to tail off here in the middle of the Big Ten stretch, where we can hopefully compile some wins. And so after that big win at home versus Purdue, net rankings skyrocketed up into the low 40s. Obviously, we had a little bit of a disappointing setback last night in Iowa City. I'll talk about that just in a moment, but really want to focus on that win over Purdue. First time since 1982, Nebraska has a victory over the number one team in the country. I think you go back to like 1956, somewhere right around there, for the last time Nebraska had a home victory over the number one team in the country. And just really want to give some praise here to Fred Hoiberg and his formulation of this roster. This, in every such of the word, is a team. You're not going to find a lot of superstars on this squad. You're not going to find any lottery picks. You might not even find an NBA draft pick. But the way that he's compiled this roster, the way that everybody's bought into their role, it's just really fun brand of basketball to watch, both on the offense and defensive side of the floor. Diving into that 88-72 win over Purdue, a couple things that I really want to mention real quick before we get into football. Everybody on the team really contributed, and I would start and finish with Rink Mast. I had a lot of questions coming into the year. With Mast coming over from Bradley from the Missouri Valley Conference, was he big enough, strong enough, tough enough to compete with the bigs in the Big Ten Conference? And it doesn't get any bigger than the National Player of the Year in Zach Edey. And really, for those that watch this game, Rink Mast dominated the dude. He got under his skin. He bodied him. He was pesky. He brought him out of the paint. Rink Mast finished with 18 points, 4 boards, 3 assists. But really, if you watch the game, it was some of those non-statistical things that really pushed this team forward, got Zach Edey out of his game, and so that's where I would start. But it goes much deeper than that. Tominaga went off, 19 points, hit a ton of big threes. A couple of times it got down to 1-2 possessions. He came in and hit some big threes. Bryce Williams, before the game, I even said, just, with him on his ankle, I said, just leave him out of this game. Let's rest him up for Iowa. That'll get us our second win in this stretch. Well, I couldn't have been more wrong. Guy comes in and almost has a triple-double, 9 points, 11 boards, 9 assists, 2 huge blocks, one right there at the end on Zach Edey from behind. Just really balled out. Super excited about that kid. CJ Wilcher and Sam Hoiberg are just Energizer buddies off the bench. 30 points in total from the bench. That's a crazy number. 14 of 23 from three-point range. And Purdue didn't play bad. Purdue hit 13 threes themselves. And so this was just Nebraska outplaying Purdue. If you look back to like Creighton last year, I don't want to take anything away from that win, but a lot of people did say and can say Nebraska beat Creighton because Creighton couldn't throw it into the ocean that night. Well, Purdue played really well Tuesday night. Maybe not really well. That's taking it too far, but they played well. 13 threes, and Nebraska still won by 16. And so just a massive, massive win. You're starting to see Nebraska now show up in a lot of these mock tournaments, projections, bracketology. Now, that win got dampened slightly last night, Friday night in Iowa City. But anyway, that's watched college basketball, follows college basketball. They knew that was coming. In a lot of ways, you can thank the Big Ten Conference and television partners for that. You've got a situation where Nebraska's coming off a Tuesday night playing the number one team in the country, upsets the number one team in the country, then gets really 1 day of prep, then a travel day, and it has to play at Iowa City, or in Iowa City against Iowa, whereas Iowa had 6 days of rest, 6 days of prep, and then they get to play at home. It's just, you could see it coming. Their legs weren't there. Shots weren't falling. I know at one point they were like 2 of 20 from three or some ridiculous stat like that. So what you do there is you just flush that one. It happens. Missed opportunity, yes. Does it kill the resume? No. Just don't let that beat us twice. We've got Rutgers coming up this week at Rutgers, and then at home versus Northwestern. So let's take care of business there. We should be favorites in both. Maybe at worst a 1 or 2 dog at Rutgers, but we're a better basketball team than Rutgers, and so take care of business there. Let's get those 2 wins, and we're right back where we need to be. So that's Nebraska basketball. Really exciting times. All I ask for Nebraska basketball is to pull me through the winter. We got blizzards. We've got negative 30, 40 degree wind chill. Just keep my interest through winter. And they're certainly doing that. But with that, let's transition to football. I want to try to keep this podcast at about 30 minutes. A lot of, again, should be a quiet time in football right now, but it was everything but. Want to talk through some key additions that we picked up this week. 5 transfer portal commitments. A couple have already they don't really sign a national letter of intent as the transfer, but they're on campus already going through activities, so they're officially part of the team, have been announced by the team. First one, Isaiah Nayor. He committed last Friday, January 5th, has already been communicated or has been announced by the football programs. He's officially part of the team. Really interesting prospect, 6'3", 215 pounds, transfers from Texas via Wyoming. 2 years ago, this was the biggest wide receiver recruit on the market, and then chose to go to Texas. You go back 2 springs, he was the talk of Texas's camp. It was really set up for that 2021 season to be their number one. After or right prior to 2021, he suffered just an awful knee injury, missed the entire 2021 season, tried to come back in 2022. Really, I mean, honestly, Texas is just loaded. They got probably 2 first-rounders ahead of them. Really couldn't see the field, but 1 game, 1 reception, 14 yards. But if you go back to his Wyoming film, 2021 stats, 44 receptions, 878 yards, and 12 touchdowns. Anybody that's watched Wyoming, Craig Bowl, they're not a passing offense. Those stats and that kind of offense, it really jumps off of the page, and I'm really excited about this addition. Adds experience to a very inexperienced room. Big-bodied receiver, somebody that Malachi Coleman can really learn from. Technically coming in as a senior with COVID and then the injury that I mentioned, there is an opportunity there to submit a waiver to gain an extra year of eligibility, so we could get 2 years with Nayor. Really, really cool, really good pickup from my perspective. The next Saturday, the 6th, we got probably my most exciting prospect, Dante Dowdell, running back transfer out of Oregon, 6'2", 210, so a big physical back. His story is really interesting. He was a 4-star running back out of Mississippi as far as part of the 2023 class. Depending on the service you look at, number 6 running back on Rivals overall, number 9 on 247, number 8 on On3. I really look at him as just the perfect replacement for the Keywan Lacey miss. So we didn't sign any backs, high school backs in 2024, but we're essentially replacing Keywan Lacey with Dante Dowdell. In my opinion, it's a great or perfect scenario. You're getting a running back with college experience, but really no tread on those tires. And he's not leaving Oregon because of a negative situation. He was a problem there, or anything like that. It's simply the fact Oregon's loaded. They've got 2 backs in front of them that are returning near 1,000-yard rushers. Played in 6 games at Oregon this past year, 17 carries, 90 yards, 5.3 yards per attempt. Honestly, it's kind of criminal that they didn't redshirt him last year and he lost a year of eligibility. Their mess up is probably our gain, because if he is able to redshirt, he most likely stays at Oregon now that his clock has started. Obviously, he's not looking to redshirt in 2024. He's looking to get playing time, get film. And so instead of sitting behind 2 NFL backs there in Oregon, decides to transfer and ends up at Nebraska. Do want to give kudos to EJ Barthel on this one. I was pretty critical of him last week from a recruiting perspective. I don't back down or back away from any of those comments last week, but I also then need to, in return, give kudos where kudos is deserved. EJ played a big part in this commitment, spent a lot of time with Dante on the visit and with his dad. His dad's a big key player in Mississippi, does a lot of things with the Army All-American game. They've got connections across the game. Did a lot of research into EJ Barthel, got the thumbs up from around the country on how they will develop Dante. And the 3 of them really hit it off, EJ, Dante, and Dante's father. And so still think we need to get a lot more out of that running back coach position from a recruiting perspective. But obviously he deserves a tremendous amount of kudos for locking this one up. Dante has also been announced. He's officially into the program. And everybody's coming in this weekend to report and start winter conditioning. Wednesday, January 10th, we got Micah Mazuka. I've heard that his last name pronounced several different ways. I'm going to go with Mazuka. This was a surprise commitment, really not on anybody's radar. Didn't even visit this cycle. He's a transfer from Florida via Baylor. Did play under Matt Rule in Baylor. Interestingly enough, he visited last year when he was transferring from Baylor to Florida. A lot of people felt like Nebraska was the leader for his commitment last year before he visited Florida. His younger brother's a walk-on here. There's a lot of family ties that go back to Rule's time at Baylor. This is really a big addition, and I talked last week around. I should mention he's 6'5", 325, and he plays the guard position. He's probably slotted for right guard. But I talked last week how I think the offensive line is set up to be a strength on this team for the first time in, I'll just call it a decade. And this adds a plug-and-play day one starter. And so last week, as we kind of broke the line down, I was thinking left tackle Prohaska, left guard Corcoran, center Scott, right guard Justin Evans-Jenkins, right tackle Benhart. I think it's going to be interesting. I think Mazuka takes Corcoran's spot, which might be a little bit controversial. I know the staff is really, really high on Justin Evans-Jenkins. I think he's going to be on the field. And so I see maybe Justin Evans-Jenkins moving to left guard with this change, and then Mazuka sliding in at right guard. So now you've got a right side of Scott, Mazuka, Benhart. That's a dream, guys. Something we haven't had forever. You had Dowdell, potentially Irvin, Emmett Johnson running behind that. You then you kick Corcoran out of the starting lineup, but you use him more as a swing offensive lineman, as your sixth offensive lineman who can come in, play guard or tackle. Still think it's criminal that we put Corcoran out at tackle, but it is what it is. We're in his fifth year at this point, so I think he could be a stud at guard. I hope he gets a lot of time at guard. But we finally have depth and experience on the offensive line, and by no mistake, Mazuka is a day one starter. He's taking Corcoran or Justin Evans Jenkins' spot, and I would lean towards him taking Corcoran's spot. I know the staff's just really high on Justin Evans Jenkins, and I don't see him losing a role as long as he does everything that we would anticipate him doing over spring, and then obviously into the fall. Thursday then was a big day. We got 2 commitments. On Thursday, we'll start with the wide receiver, Jamal Banks, 6'4", 205 transfer from Wake Forest. Not as much information out there on Banks as far as his recruitment and his process. I can tell you he had interest in opportunities at Notre Dame, Florida State, and the wild card coming down to the end was Michigan. He's another big-bodied 6'4", 205 wide receiver. Tons of production at the Power 5 level. In 2023, 59 receptions, 653 yards, 4 touchdowns. 2022, when he had Sam Hartman throwing to him, 42 receptions, 636 yards, 9 touchdowns. Big-time possession wide receiver, but one that can win the 50-50 ball, and certainly a threat in the red zone. So you start to think about our red zone offense now. You've got Nayor, Banks, Malachi Coleman, Thomas Fidone, big-bodied wide receivers, pass catchers that are able to take and win those 50-50 balls, which is what you need in the Big Ten in the red zone. That field really condenses as you get inside that 10-yard line. You're not going to be able to run it up the middle. You're not going to be able to pound the Ohio States, the Wisconsins, the Iowas. You've got to make plays down there. You've got to have playmakers. Jamal Banks is that. He will come in as a senior. Kind of a perfect scenario because remember, you got Malachi Coleman, Lloyd, Doss coming up, Bell even coming up as these young wide receivers. So now we've got Banks, we've got Nayor to really help mentor these young wide receivers. They can come in and really, play off of these guys as opposed to having, Malachi Coleman is, I don't want to push him in to have to be the number one. I want him to evolve into the number one. He can kind of do that now as opposed to being pushed into that role. So Jamal Banks is another just massive pickup. And then last one came through Thursday afternoon. Stephon Thompson, 6'1", 250-pound linebacker from Syracuse, played under Tony White back in 2022, 2021. Took visits to Kansas State, Florida State, Nebraska. Really came down to Florida State and Nebraska. This is going to be an interesting prospect because on film, on paper, he looks more like an edge or outside linebacker. I think they plan on playing him more on the inside. Could also see Sherman move to the inside. Looking for really replacements for Luke Reimer, Nick Henrich. Career stats, played in 35 games, 140 tackles, 16 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks. He's another one, suffered a devastating knee injury back in 2022. Missed most of that season. Came back this past season, played all 12 games, solid production, 45 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. A lot of those knee injuries takes 18-24 months to fully recover. Obviously, you see guys playing the next season all the time, but I'm talking about full 100% recovery. So I do think he'll take a jump this year compared to 2023. He'll also get back into Tony White's defense, where he was extremely successful, had high production. He'll be classified as a junior next year, and it gives us that depth again that's needed at the linebacker core. A lot of talent there. We talked about that last week, but that's a lot of production to replace for Luke and Nick. Luke obviously graduating and moving on to the NFL, Nick retiring from the game after some of his injuries. But I mean, if you look at what the staff did, we knew that the transfer portal additions, that class, if you will, would be small. The numbers from a scholarship distribution perspective are way over the 85 limit. It's hard to find specific numbers because you've got different, NIL scholarships. You got, walk-ons coming on and off scholarship. I'm tracking us at like 97, 98, maybe even 99 after these 5. And so I wouldn't expect maybe one more addition, but with every addition needs to come a subtraction. And so I'm excited with what this staff did. Ultra aggressive, identified the holes within the team, within the roster, and fit those holes, and really sets specifically this offense up to look vastly different in 2024 than it did in 2023. So those are the 5 additions that we had. Do want to talk briefly, kind of wrap up with staff rumors. We touched on this last week, touched on EJ Barthel, hit on him earlier in the pod. But Saturday, it was funny, I mentioned his name on last week's pod as somebody that was getting some under the radar smoke, if you will. Dana Holgorsen. I wrapped up the pod, got the pod posted, and then all of these, my Twitter feed starts to blow up and it says, hey, Dana Holgorsen's at the wrestling match watching Nash Hutmacher. So obviously we've got some activity there with Dana Holgorsen. Here's what I'll say on Dana Holgorsen. He's obviously in play, right? So I don't want to minimize that, but I'm confident Marcus Satterfield's going to be the offensive coordinator on this team, or for this team in 2024. I'm also confident Marcus Satterfield will not be coaching quarterbacks in 2024. See him moving to that tight end role, which we talked about last week. I think Dana Holgorsen, if he takes a role on this staff, will be an analyst. He's going to be more behind the scenes, not a recruiter. He'll be more in that analyst role, supporting Rule, supporting Satterfield. Just a really bright offensive mind, developing players, developing quarterbacks, drawing up schemes, plays. He'll be a huge asset in that role. Certainly seems to have a ton of momentum for him taking a role on the staff, one that we should certainly be excited about. I just don't think it's going to be in that 10 on-field coach role. Now, what's interesting is May, June this year, the NCAA is voting on analysts being allowed or able to coach on the field. If that were to pass, and Holgorsen takes what I think he will, which is an analyst role in this team, that opens the door for a tremendous amount of opportunities to kind of use his expertise, his experience. So something to continue to watch. I don't know that it's imminent. I've heard Dana has kind of wanted his time to recharge since being let go at Houston, really wanting time with family, and not wanting to hit the grind of recruiting and such. And so that's why I lean more towards analyst. And I don't think it's going to be one of those quick decisions, announcements, maybe more towards beginning of February or towards, as we approach spring ball. With that though, I mentioned last week, Glenn Thomas, an individual to keep an eye on for that quarterback coach position role. That's the name that I continue to hear this week. Glenn, as a reminder, he's quarterback coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Kind of hoping they wouldn't make the playoffs because to speed this up a little bit. Unfortunately, they did back into the playoffs. They played the Bills. Was supposed to be Sunday. It got pushed back to Monday due to the weather. Once that Steelers season wraps up, I do still anticipate Glenn Thomas taking on that quarterback coach position. My only questions with that is, does it come with like a co-offensive coordinator role? I could still see something where Glenn Thomas is co-offensive coordinator, pass game coordinator, quarterbacks coach, right? Combination of those titles. Marcus Satterfield, co-offensive coordinator, run game coordinator, tight ends coach, combination of those titles, right? It allows you to pay Glenn Thomas, over the $1 million, bring him in. His focus will be quarterbacks. Obviously, he'll be key in the game planning development. But I go back to my first comments when we started this is I do anticipate Satterfield being the offensive coordinator, calling the plays, being the man in control of this offense next year. But we've got some individuals, professionals coming in around him, which I think can be really beneficial. And I'll go back to what I said last week. I think it's unfair to grade Marcus Satterfield from an offensive coordinator position after 2023. Too many injuries, really young group on the field at the end of the year, running an offense that he's never ran before, having to really develop something around the skill set of the players on the field, which I think he did a great job of. There were guys running open, if you look at the All-22, with respect to some of those pass routes. And so I think there's some excitement that should be had there. You add Dylan Raiola, you add these pass catchers that we talked about. Offensive line, again, I think is going to be a strength. Dante Dowdell at running back with Emmett Johnson, Gabe Irvin hopefully coming back, Ramir Johnson. That offense is going to look night and day different in 2024 than it did in 2023. You complement that with the defense. I think you got something special cooking for 2024. But let's get into spring ball. Let's get through spring ball. Let's see what Dylan Raiola looks like. Let's see what some of these new pieces look like before we get too far down that excitement. But I do think there's some excitement to be had with that group. So with that, we're going to start to wrap up. Just a quick take on the national title game. So that played out Monday night. Kudos to Michigan for winning the title. Kind of a pro-con situation in my head. Pro, Big Ten gets a national title. Pro, Northern team wins a national title. Pro, no SEC team in the final. No SEC team winning the championship. Just feel kind of gross, though, too, right? I mean, I'm just going to say it. Michigan cheated. I don't know anyway else anywhere. I don't know how else to say it. I do feel it's a tainted championship. It's probably the best way that I can put it. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the next 2 or 3 years. The NCAA is not going away. The NCAA is going to continue to dig into Michigan. There's multiple investigations. Heck, the FBI is on campus looking at some of those computer crime incidences from their offensive coordinator in 2022. People forget that he just kind of disappeared and walked away. And so you've got the FBI on campus looking at that. You've got the NCAA looking at not only the COVID situation where he had impermissible visitors and practices, and then him lying to the NCAA, and then you've got the sign stealing scandal. I don't know. NCAA is pretty toothless at this point, but it'd be interesting to see if they're still kind of recognized as national champions in 2 or 3 years from now. But again, kind of a pro-con situation in my mind. And then we had major news coming out of, Wednesday, Thursday. Nick Saban retires. Kalen DeBoer was named last night as his replacement. Just a really quick rise for DeBoer in this industry. Just a few years ago was at Sioux Falls, South Dakota, NAIA. Now he's going to Bama. I know DeBoer was a name that was on Trev's list last year. At the time, he had only had 1 year in Washington, really wasn't looking to make that move at that point in time. Obviously had a team stacked coming into this last year. And interestingly enough, in my day job, I've got colleagues, peers in Sioux Falls, South Dakota that know Kalen DeBoer, have actually been coached by Kalen DeBoer. Super nice guy. One of the good guys in the industry. Wins everywhere he goes. I don't have his stats right in front of me, but he's something ridiculous, like 103 and 20 or 103 and 15. I don't have him in front of me, but from NAIA, offense coordinator, Indiana to Fresno State, then to Washington, the guy just wins. He's in a really tough position taking over for the GOAT. I don't know if his recruiting is up to that level. I'm going to be fascinated to follow it. I'm torn. Big Kalen DeBoer fan just because of the, two or three, people that I know that know him individually and have talked about him for the last several years and have been following him. So I'm a fan of him. Not a fan of the SEC, not a fan of Alabama. Would like to see Alabama fall and burn, if I'm being completely honest. But we'll see how it plays out. That's what makes college football so much fun. So let's wrap up. We're about 30 minutes in. I do want to keep these to about 30 minutes. Again, want to thank you guys for sticking with me. Again, episode 2, going to continue to evolve, going to continue to make this thing bigger, better, more entertaining. Certainly welcome your feedback, your interaction on X, Twitter. Please take time to listen and rate on Spotify, iTunes. If there's anything you want to hear on the pod, any guests that you want to hear that we can reach out to, happy to do that as well. It's an exciting time in Husker athletics. You could be seeing history made on the Nebraska basketball side. I think this football team in 2024 is ready to take a huge jump. Next 2024, man, could be a very special year in Husker athletics on the men's side, which is much, much, much needed. So going to wrap up today. We'll be doing another pod next weekend. Everybody have a great weekend. We got NFL playoffs. Most people are off on Monday for MLK. And so we will see what comes up this week in Husker athletics, and we will get back together next week. So thanks, guys. Appreciate it.